Long before the fall of the Jedi Order, Qui-Gon Jinn was troubled by something. It was a time of relative peace. Jinn should have been happier. After all, his apprentice Obi-Wan Kenobi was quickly becoming one of the most promising Jedi in the entire Order. Soon Jinn imagined Kenobi might rise as a knight and continue Jinn's preaching of the living Force. But Qui-Gon continued to be disturbed by a single nagging doubt that tugged at his senses. Something was gravely wrong with the Jedi Order. Whenever Jinn went, the Republic's inhabitants looked at him with awe, hoping to see the mighty fighting prowess of a Jedi warrior, instead of the humble peacekeepers the Jedi were originally meant to be. After confronting Grandmaster Yoda about his troubles, Jinn thought that he might be able to unburden himself. Yoda's words always had a way of erasing doubts from his mind. But when Qui-Gon met the emerald-skinned sage on a temple balcony that overlooked the setting of the capital's planet's single sun, Coruscant Prime, Jinn was saddened to hear that Yoda didn't understand his problems. Hoping that meditation might show him an answer, Jinn boarded his Delta 7 starfighter and allowed the Force to guide him to a nexus. But to his shock, the destination turned out to be a powerful well of the dark side. What did Jinn discover there? And what lessons did he learn from the darkness? Join us in today's underrated moment as we answer these questions and more. The walls of the hyperspace tunnel glowed in waves of expanding blue and white light until, with a sudden jerk, they all disappeared. As his slender ship undocked from its engine ring, Qui-Gon opened his eyes for the first time since he had departed Coruscant and discovered that the Force had guided him to a strange, green-hued planet. When Jinn checked the logs of his Navi console, he discovered that the planet beneath him was ancient, part of the charted worlds that the Republic unearthed centuries earlier. But for some reason, it was never given a name, and never even hosted a settlement. Curious as to why the Force would guide him to such a place, Qui-Gon pressed down on the Delta 7's yokes and pierced the upper atmosphere of the mysterious world. Rings of purple clouds yielded to Jinn's ship, and in almost no time the Jedi Master found himself on the surface below. The powerful Jedi rarely used his eyes to observe his surroundings and instead relied more on the Force, but even Jinn was overwhelmed by the pure beauty of this strange world. In the distance, a pair of twin blue moons hung in the sky, and beneath them, the jagged peaks of similarly colored mountains comprised a distant range. Jinn had parked his Delta 7 starfighter in a windswept valley filled with tall fields of grass. Everywhere he looked, the Master found signs of overwhelming life. But it was different from anything else he was used to. He also allowed the Force to guide him. Jinn found that the grass yielded to more alien vegetation, throbbing blue spirals of vines and greenish-gray coral. As he reached out to touch a tendril of one of the plants, Qui-Gon tried to sense what was causing the landscape to create such beautiful diversity. And then, like a cold breath of wind, Jinn felt it, a disturbance in the Force. It was weak at first, but if he closed his eyes, Jinn could find where the frigid aura was emanating from. Bracing himself against a quick unease that was setting in around him, Qui-Gon turned towards the source of energy and started his march. As he felt the fields of grass transformed even more, now the ground took on a bright red hue. The massive black splinters etched all throughout, and on either side of the Jedi, massive coral structures, like something from the trenches of Mon Cala, grew all around him. Jinn wasn't quite sure what he was walking into, and the trepidation caused him to doubt himself. As he looked at the road behind him, towards the lush green fields that seemed undisturbed by the mysterious dark Force, Jinn couldn't help but wonder if he had been a fool. Perhaps the Jedi Code and the very beliefs that Master Yoda passed on to his students were based on a reality that Jinn had yet to experience. Having never faced the true horrors of war or the dark side, it was all too easy for Master Qui-Gon to admonish his fellow Jedi and scold them for foolishly igniting their lightsabers in conflicts across the galaxy. But did they know more than he? Were they simply protecting the greater good from the cold, dark presence that loomed just out of sight, always threatening to undo their peace? Qui-Gon took a deep breath and allowed these thoughts to dissipate from his mind. Gripping his cloak around his head, the Master marched further and further along the Crimson Road, crushing the black veins of mysterious life that seemed to be pumping the land full of poison. Soon Qui-Gon discovered the source of the planet's strange beauty, a massive, twisted spire completely comprised of the dark side. It was a nexus, the very same type that Darth Vader would later use to try and resurrect his deceased wife, Padme Amidala. As Qui-Gon looked at the tower and the red throne that laid within, he wondered what he should do. Was this a temptation? Was the universe offering him the powers of the dark side, as it had so often done to Jedi in the past? Or was this a lesson, a challenge that Qui-Gon should overcome in order to understand Master Yoda? Taking the courage in the fact that the living force guided his actions, Qui-Gon marched up the purple staircase and sat on the throne. He once again closed his eyes and delved his mind into the Force. When he opened them, within a new realm, he was shocked at what he saw. All around, a vast barren desert expanded, and from beneath the heights of its dunes, long black veins, the very same ones that seemed to turn the surface of the planet crimson, were reaching out for Qui-Gon. Frightened, Jinn leapt back, but the tendrils didn't stop. They sprouted from the ground, taking on the form of a simple red vine at first, but then developed into something else altogether. Giant, dark-side ghouls. Encircled, and with no place left to run, Qui-Gon reached for his slender metal hilt of his lightsaber, which was attached to a clip on his belt. With a quick flick of a switch, he ignited the blade and sliced through his enemies, but when the battle was over, the red corpse transformed into the bloody forms of his fellow Jedi at the temple. Shocked and confused, Qui-Gon looked down at the palms of his hands and saw the black tendrils now growing from his own body, and in a matter of seconds, the ribbons of the dark side enveloped him, nearly consuming him altogether. When the final vine threatened to close around Qui-Gon's eyes, the Jedi Master summoned all the power he could and forced himself to wake up from the nightmare. If it had gone on any longer, the dark side might have consumed him, but thankfully Jinn survived. As he sat on the throne of the dark side, surrounded by the same black veins that nearly turned him away from the light, Jinn couldn't help but notice the rising of the world's single golden star. And Jinn realized, on this world, the living force lived in complete balance. Half in the beautiful sunlight where grass-covered hills and dales give birth to lush life, and the other half in the shadow of the dark side, were equally beautiful, albeit terrifying. Coral-like structures carved out a place for themselves. As Jinn reached down to touch a red rose petal, a beautiful result of the dark side nexus, he felt more conflicted than ever. And in the end, instead of understanding Master Yoda's point of view, Jinn felt more assured in his own. After all, the vision showed him a simple truth. If Jedi, servants of the light, ever used violence to solve the problem, they would only spread the dark side further. That, in itself, was enough to cause an imbalance in the Force. Instead, the Jedi needed to find other solutions beyond violence. Because, as Jinn discovered, violence was a tool of the dark side, and for balance to be achieved, only the dark side should use it.